The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the images appeared on the massive screen. Admiral Crixtal of the Vorthan Empire leaned forward in his seat, his four eyes widening with what could only be described as disbelief. His scales, normally a calm blue color, shifted to a troubled gray as he processed what he was seeing. "This cannot be real," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The data must be wrong." The human ambassador, a woman named Alina Chen, stood calmly at the podium. She wore a simple gray uniform, nothing like the bright colors and expensive fabrics of the other species. Her face showed no emotion as she waited for the room to quiet down. She had expected this reaction. In fact, she had counted on it. "I assure you, Admiral, the data is correct," she said. "What you are seeing is the third human fleet. It was built entirely from salvage collected after the Battle of Sigma Reach." The images showed massive warships, their hulls a mix of different metals and designs. Some sections were clearly from Vorthan vessels, with their distinctive green alloy and curved weapons ports. Others bore the curved lines of Kalrani ships, their crystalline viewing panels still intact. Still others had the angular shapes of Drexian cruisers, their mechanical precision obvious even in the damaged state. They were ugly ships. They looked like they had been put together by children playing with broken toys. But they were armed, they were functional, and there were hundreds of them. High Chancellor Melith of the Kalrani Collective rose from her floating chair. Her pale blue skin seemed even lighter than usual, and her long fingers trembled slightly as she pointed at the screen. "Ambassador Chen, are you saying that your species built an entire fleet from the wreckage of our destroyed vessels?" "Not just Kalrani vessels, High Chancellor," Alina replied. "We used everything we could find. Vorthan, Kalrani, Drexian, even some pieces from unknown species that we have not yet identified. We do not waste." The room erupted in noise. Representatives from a dozen species shouted questions or made sounds of shock. Some pounded their appendages on tables. Others whispered urgently to their aides. The Galactic Council had existed for over 10,000 years. In all that time, no species had ever done what the humans were showing. When a fleet was destroyed in battle, the wreckage was left to drift in space. This was the way of things. This was how it had always been. Sometimes salvage teams would collect valuable materials. Sometimes the pieces were towed to recycling stations where they were melted down and reformed into raw materials. But no one, in all the long history of galactic civilization, had ever collected battle wreckage and turned it directly into new warships. The idea was considered impossible. It was considered foolish. It was considered beneath the dignity of any proper spacefaring species. Ships were built fresh, from pure materials in proper shipyards. That was the civilized way. That was the only way. Admiral finally found his voice again. "This is madness," he said. "Those ships cannot possibly function properly. The systems will not work together. The power grids will clash. The hull integrity will fail at the connection points. Any battle will destroy them." Alina smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had heard these arguments many times before. "The Third Fleet has been in service for 3 years, Admiral. In that time, it has fought in 17 engagements. It has lost 4 ships. It has destroyed 247 enemy vessels." The silence that followed was complete. Even the ambient sounds of the chamber seemed to fade away. The floating lights that illuminated the council hall flickered, as if affected by the shock in the room. "That is impossible," whispered Representative Drex of the Drexian Assembly. His metal body did not show emotion, but his voice carried something close to fear. His optical sensors focused intensely on the human ambassador, analyzing her for any sign of deception. "We have records of every battle," Alina said. "We will share them with any member of the council who wishes to verify our claims. We have nothing to hide. But I did not come here to boast about our military strength. I came here to make a proposal." She touched a control on the podium, and the images changed. Now they showed a debris field of enormous size. Thousands of broken ships floated among clouds of smaller fragments. It was the aftermath of the Battle of the Void Gate, where three great fleets had met and destroyed each other 200 years ago. The debris had been drifting ever since, slowly spreading across a region of space larger than many star systems. It was a memorial to a tragedy that had shaped galactic politics for generations. This debris field contains enough material to build 10,000 warships, Alina said. The Galactic Council has declared it a memorial site. No one is allowed to disturb it. We respectfully ask for permission to salvage this field. The reaction was immediate and angry. You would desecrate the graves of our ancestors, shouted the Kelrani representative. Millions of our people died there. Their spirits rest among those ruins. The Vorthan Empire will never allow such disrespect to our fallen warriors, Admiral Crixtal declared, rising to his full height. His scales had turned bright red with anger. This proposal is an insult to everything we hold sacred. Alina waited for the shouting to die down. Her expression did not change. She had prepared for this moment for years. She knew exactly what she needed to say. I understand your feelings, she said, but consider this. Right now, the Nexar swarm is expanding toward this region of space. They have already consumed 300 inhabited worlds. They are building their own fleets from the resources they capture. In 50 years, perhaps less, they will reach the borders of Council space. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Nexar swarm was a threat that every species in the galaxy feared. They were not a civilization. They were a force of nature. They consumed everything in their path and used it to make more of themselves. Their organic ships grew from the processed remains of entire planets. No one had ever stopped them. The best anyone could do was slow them down and hope they turned in another direction. The combined fleets of the Galactic Council number approximately 8,000 warships, Alina continued. The Nexar swarm has been estimated to have over 100,000 vessels, and that number grows every day. We do not have enough ships to fight them. We do not have enough shipyards to build new ones fast enough. We do not have enough time. She gestured at the image of the debris field. But we do have this, and we have the knowledge to turn it into a fleet large enough to make a difference. High Chancellor Melith raised a hand for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, though resentment still hung in the air like smoke. Ambassador Chen, even if we granted your request, how could you possibly build ships fast enough? Our most advanced shipyards take years to construct a single vessel. The precision required is immense. Your shipyards take years because they build ships from nothing, Alina said. They mine raw materials, process them, manufacture components, and assemble them into finished vessels. We do not do that. We take what already exists and make it work again. A human salvage team can have a working warship in 3 months. That is still not fast enough, Melith said. 3 months per ship would give us only 4 ships per year from each team. We have 14,000 salvage teams, Alina replied. The numbers were staggering. The council members began to do the math in their heads. Some used calculating devices. Others simply stared in disbelief. 14,000 teams, each producing a ship every 3 months. That was over 50,000 ships per year. In the 50 years before the Nexar arrived, that would be millions of vessels. The scale was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. You cannot have that many skilled workers, Admiral Crixtal said. It is not possible. The training required for ship construction takes decades. Alina's smile returned, and this time it was different. There was something in her eyes that the other species did not understand. Something deep and old and hungry. Something that humans had learned in their long and difficult history on a world that had tried to kill them every step of the way. Admiral, you do not understand my people, she said. We are not like you. You grew up on beautiful worlds with abundant resources. Your civilizations were built on plenty. Your species expanded when times were good and waited when times were hard. Ours was built on scarcity. We learned very early in our history that nothing can be thrown away. Everything has value. Everything can be used. She touched another control and new images appeared. They showed human history, cities built from the ruins of older cities, ships made from the wood of wrecked vessels, factories constructed from the machinery of conquered enemies, weapons forged from the metal of fallen opponents. Across thousands of years, humans had taken what others had discarded and made it their own. Where you see wreckage, we see resources, Alina said. Where you see garbage, we see potential. Where you see death, we see the materials for new life. This is who we are. This is what we do. And this is why when the Nexar swarm comes, humanity will be ready to fight them. The debate lasted for 3 days. Representatives argued and shouted and threatened. Old rivalries flared up as species blamed each other for past conflicts. The idea of allowing humans to salvage the debris fields was called everything from brilliant to insane to deeply offensive to sacrilege against the natural order. Through it all, Alina Chen remained calm. She answered every question. She responded to every objection. She showed data, presented plans, and made promises. She met privately with dozens of representatives, explaining her vision and addressing their concerns. And slowly, gradually, she began to change minds. The turning point came on the second day, when the Kelrani High Chancellor asked to speak privately with Alina. They met in a small room off the main chamber, decorated in the blue and silver colors of Kelrani tradition. Melith floated in her chair, her expression unreadable, her long fingers folded in her lap. "Ambassador Chen, I must ask you something that I could not ask in the public forum," she said. "Your people have only been part of galactic society for 80 years. In that time, you have built a fleet that rivals any in the Council. You have colonized 40 worlds. You have developed technologies that took other species thousands of years to discover. How is this possible?" Alina considered the question carefully. She had been expecting it, but the Kelrani's sincere tone made her want to give a sincere answer. "High Chancellor, do you know what happened to humanity before we achieved faster-than-light travel? I have read the basic history. Your species fought many wars among yourselves. It is considered an aberration among spacefaring species." "That is correct. We fought constantly. We destroyed our own world's environment. We nearly wiped ourselves out several times. We experienced famines and plagues and disasters that killed billions of our people. But we also rebuilt after every disaster. When our cities burned, we built new ones. When our machines broke, we fixed them. When we had nothing, we made something from nothing." She leaned forward. The other species in this galaxy had easier paths to the stars. They evolved on peaceful worlds. They had time to develop their technologies slowly and carefully. They never had to struggle like we did. And because of that, they never learned what we learned. "And what is that?" Melith asked. "That desperation is the greatest teacher," Alina said. "That necessity drives innovation. That the fastest way to build something new is to take something old and remake it. We are not smarter than other species. We are not stronger. We are simply more practiced at survival. We have had more practice at being desperate." Melith was quiet for a long moment. Her skin shifted through several shades of blue as she processed this information. "The Nexar will not be stopped by debris made into ships," she finally said. "You know this." "I know that doing nothing will definitely fail," Alina replied. "I know that the Nexar cannot be outproduced by conventional means. I know that the only chance we have is to do something that has never been done before. And I know that humans are very good at doing the impossible when we have no other choice." The High Chancellor made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Very well, Ambassador. I will support your proposal, but I want something in return." "Name it." "When you build your fleet from our ancestors' remains, I want Kelrani engineers to work alongside your people. I want us to learn what you know. I want my people to understand how you do what you do. If this knowledge can save lives, it should not belong to only one species." Alina nodded. That was always our intention, High Chancellor. We do not want to save the galaxy alone. We want to show everyone how to save themselves. On the third day, the vote was held. It was close, closer than Alina had hoped. Several species abstained. A few voted against purely out of pride, but in the end, the proposal passed. Humanity would be allowed to salvage the great debris fields of the galaxy. They would build their impossible fleet, and the Council would watch and learn and prepare for the coming storm. As Alina left the chamber, Admiral Crixtal approached her. The Vorthan's 4 eyes studied her with an expression she could not read. His scales had settled into a thoughtful purple color. "I voted against your proposal," he said. "I know, Admiral. I do not hold it against you." "I still think your ships are ugly and your methods are foolish," he continued. "But I have seen the numbers. I have studied your battle records. Your salvage fleet has destroyed more enemy vessels in 3 years than my own fleet has in 20. He paused. "I do not understand how this is possible." Alina smiled. "Come visit our shipyards, Admiral. I will show you." 3 months later, Admiral Crixtal stood in the observation deck of a human salvage station. Below him, thousands of workers swarmed over the broken hulls of destroyed warships. The scale of the operation was beyond anything he had ever seen. The station itself was built from salvage, its structure a patchwork of different materials and designs that somehow held together in the void of space. "This is insane," he said, not for the first time. Beside him, a human engineer named Marcus laughed. He was a short man with gray hair and hands covered in scars from years of work. "That is what everyone says at first. But watch." He pointed to a section of the yard where a team of humans was working on a Vorthan cruiser. The ship had been cut in half during some long-ago battle. Its front section was missing, along with most of its internal systems. The hull was scarred with weapon impacts and radiation burns. According to everything new about shipbuilding, it was worthless scrap. But as he watched, the human team attached a new front section to the broken hull. The new piece was clearly from a different ship entirely. It was a Kalrani destroyer bow, smaller and differently shaped than the Vorthan design. Yet somehow, the humans were making it fit. Sparks flew as welders joined the two pieces together. Cables were strung between openings in both hulls. Workers crawled through the structure like insects, connecting systems and reinforcing weak points. "The systems will not be compatible," Crixtal said. "The power conduits will not match. The structural integrity will fail." "You would think so," Marcus agreed. "But look here." He handed the Admiral a data pad showing the internal structure of the modified ship. "We do not try to make the systems compatible. We bypass them entirely. We run new conduits through the structure. We add our own connection points. We create a new system that uses both sets of components." "That cannot work," Crixtal insisted. "Come back in 2 weeks," Marcus said. "I will show you the finished ship, then tell me if it works." The Admiral returned in 2 weeks. The ship was complete. It was the strangest vessel he had ever seen, a hybrid of Vorthan and Kalrani design with human additions welded onto every surface. It looked like something from a nightmare. The lines did not flow. The colors did not match. The whole thing seemed like it should fall apart from its own contradictions. And when Marcus took him on a tour of the interior, Crixtal finally began to understand. The human engineers had not tried to create a perfect ship. They had created a functional one. Every system had redundancies. Every component had backups. The ship was not elegant or efficient, but it was incredibly tough. If one system failed, 2 others could take its place. If a section of the hull was breached, the rest of the ship could continue to fight. The design philosophy was completely different from anything had ever seen. "Your ships are built like palaces," Marcus explained. "Beautiful and efficient. Every system works in harmony with every other system. But if one wall falls, the whole building comes down. Our ships are built like fortresses. Ugly, but nearly impossible to destroy completely." Crixtal walked through the hybrid ship in silence. He touched the mismatched walls. He examined the jury-rigged systems. He studied the crude but effective repairs that had been made to every damaged section. He saw how human ingenuity had turned incompatible parts into a working whole. "How long did your species develop this technique?" he finally asked. "We have been doing this since we first sailed the oceans of our homeworld," Marcus said. "When ships wrecked on our shores, we used the wood to build new vessels. When castles fell in war, we used the stones to build new walls. When machines broke, we repaired them with whatever parts we could find. This is not new technology for us, Admiral. This is just how we think." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his own hands, with their careful claws designed for precise work. He thought about the Vorthan tradition of craftsmanship, of creating perfect things from pure materials. And he realized that this tradition, as beautiful as it was, might not be enough to save his people. Then he said something that surprised both of them. "Teach me." Marcus blinked. "Admiral." "I want to learn," Crystal said. "I want to understand how your people think. I want my engineers to work beside yours. The Vorthan Empire has proud traditions, but I begin to see that pride can be a limitation." Marcus smiled and held out his hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Welcome to the salvage crew, Admiral." Over the following weeks, Crystal worked alongside human engineers. He learned their methods. He studied their philosophy. He watched them take pieces of wreckage that any Vorthan would have melted down and turned them into functional components. It was humbling. It was also enlightening. He began to see the galaxy differently. Where he once saw only debris, he now saw potential. Where he once saw waste, he now saw resources waiting to be used. The human philosophy was infectious. It changed how he thought about everything. The news spread across the galaxy. Human salvage teams, working alongside engineers from a dozen species, were building ships at an unprecedented rate. The great debris fields that had been left untouched for centuries were being transformed into the largest fleet ever assembled. Not everyone was happy about this development. Some species complained that the humans were desecrating sacred sites. Others worried that humanity was becoming too powerful. A few attempted to sabotage the salvage operations, sending raiders to attack the construction yards. Those attacks did not go well for the raiders. The salvage fleets were defended by the patchwork warships that humans built so quickly, and those ships, despite their ugly appearance, proved to be ferocious fighters. They absorbed damage that would have destroyed conventional vessels. They kept fighting even when reduced to burning wrecks. And when they finally fell, their remains were collected and used to build new ships. Ambassador Elena Chen addressed the Galactic Council again 1 year after her original proposal. This time, she brought not just images but live feeds from the construction yards. "In 12 months, we have built 8,000 new warships," she announced. "We have trained over 100,000 engineers from Council species in our salvage techniques. We have established 47 new construction yards in debris fields across the galaxy." The numbers were met with stunned silence. No civilization in galactic history had ever built ships so fast. The combined output of all Council shipyards was less than 2,000 vessels per year. "But this is only the beginning," Elena continued. "We project that within 10 years, we will have a fleet of over 100,000 ships. Within 30 years, we will match the Nexar swarm in numbers. Within 50 years, we will exceed them." Admiral Crystal rose from his seat. In the past year, he had become one of humanity's strongest supporters on the Council. His own fleet now included hundreds of salvage-built vessels, and his engineers were among the most skilled hybrid builders in the galaxy. "I once called this madness," he said. "I was wrong. This is not madness. This is the most practical, the most efficient, the most brilliant approach to warfare I have ever seen. The humans do not fight the way we fight. They do not build the way we build. They do not think the way we think. And that is exactly why they will succeed where we have failed." He turned to face the other Council members. The Nexar swarm consumed my ancestors' homeworld 3,000 years ago. Since then, my people have dreamed of revenge, but we never had the resources to challenge them. Now, for the first time, we do, because the humans showed us that resources are not something you mine from planets. Resources are everything around you if you have the will to use them. The Council voted to increase funding for the salvage program by 500%. More species sent engineers to learn human techniques. More debris fields were opened for construction. The galaxy began to prepare for war in a way it had never prepared before. 5 years later, the first Nexar scout ships appeared at the edge of Council space. They were small vessels. Probes sent ahead of the main swarm to evaluate the target. They moved with an organic grace that was disturbing to watch, their hulls pulsing like living things. In previous invasions, these scouts had reported back that the local civilizations posed no significant threat. That information had always been correct. This time, the scouts encountered something unexpected. The human Second Fleet, along with a mixed force of Council vessels, intercepted the Nexar probes near a dead star system. The battle was brief but intense. The Nexar scouts fought with their usual ferocity, their organic-looking ships moving with uncanny coordination. But the salvage fleet fought differently than anything the Nexar had encountered before. When a human ship was damaged, it did not retreat to safety. It continued fighting until it was completely destroyed. And even then, the debris from the destroyed vessel was collected by recovery ships that followed behind the battle lines. Within hours of the engagement ending, human teams were already working on the wreckage. Nexar components were being studied, analyzed, and integrated into new designs. The organic technology that made the swarm so terrifying was being turned against them. Engineers from a dozen species worked together, combining their knowledge to unlock the secrets of the enemy. Commander Sarah Williams of the Second Fleet sent her report back to Earth. It was short and to the point. First contact successful, enemy scouts destroyed, salvage operations underway, we are learning from their remains. The message was transmitted across the galaxy. For the first time in the long history of the Nexar threat, a species was not just fighting back. A species was taking the swarm's own strength and making it their own. On Earth, Elena Chen read the report with satisfaction. She was older now, her hair gray and her face lined with age, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "This is only the beginning," she said to her aide. "The swarm has never fought an enemy like us. They have never faced a species that sees their defeats as resources. They consume and grow. We do the same, but we do it faster." She looked out the window of her office at the shipyards orbiting Earth. Hundreds of salvage vessels were visible, their mismatched hulls reflecting the light of the sun. Each one had been built from the wreckage of past battles. Each one was ready to create more wreckage and turn it into more ships. "Let them come," she said. "We will turn their invasion fleet into our defense force. We will build our victory from their bones." The full Nexar swarm arrived 10 years later. It was the largest invasion force in galactic history. Over 200,000 vessels, each one a living machine grown from the consumed resources of countless worlds. They moved like a cloud of locusts, darkening the stars wherever they passed. The Galactic Council had never faced such a threat. Previous Nexar invasions had involved only tens of thousands of ships. This was 10 times larger. The combined conventional fleets of all Council species numbered less than 20,000 vessels. Even with the salvage program, the defending forces were badly outnumbered. But humanity had not been idle during those 10 years. The salvage fleet had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 300,000 ships now bore the distinctive patchwork hulls of human construction. They were crewed by members of every species in the Council, all trained in the human philosophy of waste nothing, use everything. And behind the front lines, in every debris field and abandoned system, the construction yards continued their work. Every battle added more wreckage to the salvage piles. Every destroyed Nexar ship became raw material for two new vessels. The harder the swarm pushed, the more resources they provided to their enemies. Grand Admiral Crixtal commanded the defense forces. In the 15 years since he had first visited a human salvage yard, he had transformed from a skeptic into a true believer. His flagship was a massive hybrid vessel built from the remains of 7 different ships, including components from Nexar scouts captured in earlier battles. "All fleets, this is the Grand Admiral," he broadcast across every channel. "The enemy has come in greater numbers than we expected, but we have prepared for this. Remember your training. Fight until you cannot fight. Then make sure your wreckage is collected. Everything you give today will return to the battle tomorrow." The first engagement lasted 72 hours. It was the largest space battle in recorded history. Over 100,000 ships were destroyed on both sides. The darkness of space was lit by constant explosions, like a storm of stars being born and dying all at once. When it ended, the Nexar had pushed the Council forces back 3 star systems. It looked like a defeat. The news services across the galaxy reported it as a disaster. Many species began to panic. Some tried to flee to distant parts of the galaxy. But humanity knew better. Within a month, the salvage teams had recovered enough material from the battlefield to build 40,000 new ships. Nexar organic technology was being rapidly integrated into human designs, creating vessels that combined the best of both approaches. The fleet that had been pushed back was larger after the battle than it had been before. The swarm's commanders, if they had commanders in any traditional sense, did not understand what was happening. They had never encountered an enemy that grew stronger from defeat. They had never faced a species that saw destruction as an opportunity. The second engagement went differently. Human fleets did not try to hold ground. Instead, they fought a running battle, retreating slowly while destroying as many Nexar ships as possible. And always, the recovery vessels followed behind, collecting every piece of wreckage that could be recovered. By the end of the second year of the war, the swarm had advanced deep into Council territory. They had consumed 3 worlds. They had killed billions of sentient beings, but their numbers had been reduced to 150,000 ships. The salvage fleet had grown to 500,000. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Nexar were outnumbered by their prey. Commander Sarah Williams, now Admiral Williams, led the counterattack. Her flagship was a monster of a vessel, built from the cores of 3 different Nexar hive ships merged with human and Council technology. It was twice the size of any conventional warship, and it carried weapons that no one had ever seen before. The ship itself was proof of humanity's philosophy: take what the enemy throws at you and throw it back harder. "All fleets begin advance," she ordered. "Standard salvage doctrine: destroy, recover, rebuild. Let nothing go to waste." The battle line swept forward like a tide. The Nexar, for the first time in their long history of conquest, found themselves retreating. Their ships were destroyed faster than they could grow new ones. Their consumed resources were being taken back by the very species they had tried to consume. The war lasted another 15 years. It was a grinding, brutal conflict that cost billions of lives. Entire star systems were destroyed. Species that had existed for millennia were reduced to remnants. The galaxy would bear the scars of this war for thousands of years. Monuments would be built to remember the fallen. Songs would be sung about the heroes who gave everything. But slowly, inexorably, the tide turned. The Nexar swarm, which had consumed thousands of civilizations across millions of years, began to shrink. Their invasion force of 200,000 became 100,000, then 50,000, then 10,000. Each loss made them weaker while making their enemies stronger. It was a reversal of everything they had ever known. And always in the background, the salvage yards continued their work. Every battle produced more wreckage. Every wreckage pile became more ships. The cycle was endless and relentless. In the final battle, near the heart of Nexar space, Admiral Williams commanded a fleet of over 1 million vessels. Most of them were built from Nexar remains. They used Nexar weapons, Nexar shields, Nexar propulsion. The swarm's own strength had been turned completely against them. "This is Admiral Williams to all Nexar forces," she broadcast on every frequency. "Your invasion is over. Your fleet is destroyed. Your consumed worlds will be reclaimed. This is what happens when you try to consume a species that has learned to turn consumption into creation." The last Nexar ships were destroyed or scattered. The swarm, for the first time in its existence, was broken. The threat that had hung over the galaxy for millions of years was finally ended. 100 years later, the Galactic Council held a ceremony to honor the anniversary of humanity's arrival in galactic society. The chamber was filled with representatives from thousands of species, many of which had been saved from extinction by the salvage fleets. The human ambassador was a young man named Chen, a distant descendant of Alina Chen, who had first proposed the salvage program. He stood at the podium where his ancestor had stood, looking out at the gathered representatives. "A century ago, my people were newcomers to this galaxy," he said. "We had nothing to offer but our strange ideas and our ugly ships. Many of you thought we were foolish. Some of you thought we were dangerous. A few of you thought we were insane." He smiled, and it was the same smile that Alina had worn so many years before. "We have learned much from the species of this council. We have shared technology and culture and friendship. We have become part of something greater than ourselves, but we have also taught you something that you did not know." He gestured at the window behind him, where the shipyards of the new galactic fleet were visible. They were no longer just human shipyards. Every species in the council had adopted the salvage philosophy. Nothing was wasted. Everything was used. The debris of the past became the foundation of the future. "The universe is vast and full of dangers," Chen said. "There will be other threats, other enemies, other challenges. But now you know what we have always known. That destruction is not the end. That loss is not permanent. That from the wreckage of what was, we can always build something new." He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of 100 different species. All of them were listening. All of them understood. "The universe has many fleets," he said, "but only one galaxy has learned to make them from wreckage. That is humanity's gift to the stars, and it is a gift that will never be forgotten." The chamber erupted in applause, cheers, and sounds of celebration from species that had no equivalent to human expressions of joy. The salvage fleets had saved them all, and the philosophy behind those fleets, the simple human belief that nothing should ever be wasted, had changed galactic civilization forever. In the observation deck above the chamber, a statue of Alina Chen stood looking out at the stars. Her expression was calm, determined, and slightly amused. At the base of the statue, a simple plaque read, "Ambassador Alina Chen. She showed us that the end is always a new beginning." And in the shipyards beyond, the work continued. It always continued, because there would always be wreckage to salvage, always be ships to build, always be a universe to defend. And humanity, as always, would be there to turn destruction into creation. That was their gift, that was their nature, that was what made them human.